Good morning. Quick introductions. My name is Mark Chuang. I lead product management for the VMware Cloud Foundation product line. And, couldn't have set it up better with my friend here, Rick, because this really will be a continuation of the core value propositions that he really laid out. Excited to be talking about why VMware Cloud Foundation on top of VxRail really is that match made in heaven, if you will, because a lot of the core concepts that Rick laid out in regards to what the value is in VxRail very much were the exact same motivations for why we developed Cloud Foundation in the first place. So I'm going to start off with just a quick overview in regards to our overall strategic objectives of why we developed Cloud Foundation and give you a snapshot of the capabilities. And then going to drill down into two specific areas that our customers definitely talk about the most, right? One is in that how of the lifecycle management because it addresses a key pain point. But then secondly, how we help customers to be able to carve out their infrastructure more rapidly through a construct in Cloud Foundation called Workload Domains. And then finally, I'll just wrap up with two examples of real customers and how they're applying that and what challenges that they were solving. Let's go into Cloud Foundation first. The tenets of it, you're going to see a lot of the same themes that actually was talked about with VxRail. So if you start, right, our whole goal here was to say, look, let's offer a way so that customers have the reassurance of, if I deploy this solution, it's based on VMware best practices. Okay, that's where the prescriptive part comes in. Number two, let's make sure that the whole of what we bring together is more than just what a customer could have done with the individual sum of the parts there. So that full stack approach in which we're saying, look, at the end of the day, let's give the customer a complete outcome. So it is not just about, compute individually or storage or network individually, but it's bringing that full stack approach. The tested and the validated, right? Key part of that value proposition, not asking customers to have to figure out like which components go together with which, what are the different versions if some new release comes out, but making sure that tested validation and going back to that term known good state, right? Helping that customer go from one known good state to the next known good state and just have full confidence in that because they're relying upon the scale, the resiliency, the interoperability, the functional testing that is above and beyond what the individual products do. And from that then, it really lays that foundation so that we can achieve greater levels of automation, not just at the infrastructure level, but then also as you go up, so that you could easily envision saying, there was a question earlier about Kubernetes and containerize, and I'll get to that in a moment. But you can see how you could apply that same concept above and beyond not just the compute, network, storage, and cloud management, but the Kubernetes and the containers layer or other application layers on top of that. Because that's really that total package that gets customers to that outcome that they're striving for, right? Because we're not enabling every single knob and configuration possible, right? We're all kind of technology geeks at heart. We like to tune. We like to go in and adjust every knob. But if you really think about the public cloud experience, right? You get your agility, you get that speed because you're saying, we're taking away some of that customization, but you're going to get a lot in return. So simplifying that experience. And then when we talk about built-in security there's actually two facets of it. One is saying when you deploy this solution, it's already got built in the hardening, the best practices, et cetera, that exist. And the customer could figure out all of that themselves, but takes time, right? We're going to do that for them. And then secondly, you're going to just inherently get the advantages of security capabilities that are built into the native products, whether it's things like encryption of data at rest, encryption of data in motion, right? All those things that are in the products themselves. So Cloud Foundation fundamentally at a principles level is driven by delivering on these tenets here. What is in it, right? Well, the core components is you've got your virtualized compute, aka vSphere, you've got your virtualized storage, you've got your virtualized networking, and you've got that cloud management plane across the top. taking advantage of the built-in security capabilities. And then there is that additional secret sauce here of that day 2 operations, including lifecycle management, and that's an additional layer of software that goes in it. Our strategy is actually to take that consistent infrastructure and apply it for customers that are running both their on-premises environments, called out on this slide here as private cloud. So in that case, they still own it. They still ultimately own operating it. And so job of my team, Cloud Foundation team, is how do I make that process easier, faster, and less expensive to operate over time. But we also then apply that exact same stack out to the offer it to service providers that are running their public clouds. And as you're going to hear about from Kit right after me, we also take that same compute, network, and storage stack. And for customers who are ready to say, you know what, VMware, you handle everything, right, in more of like a managed service offering, but running on premises, that's what you'll hear about with VMware Cloud on Dell EMC.
Excuse me, can you talk a little bit more about encryption of data in transit or in motion?
Yeah, so for instance, what I was referring to there is if you look at core vSphere capabilities, when you've got a vMotion that's taking place, right, there's the capability to be able to encrypt that type of traffic.
Okay.
So, just a little bit of clarity between VCF and kind of the opinionated approach to cloud. When I hear the term VCF, VMware has done a pretty good job of saying, this is what it looks like, this is how it feels. But when I abstract that up a layer, and I look at solutions that are kind of close to VCF, but not exactly VCF, so Cloud Simple and Azure and GCP, what are the guarantees of that opinionated approach across the VCF brand and some of these solutions that look similar to VCF, but not VCF?
Right. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, those examples you brought up are different solutions coming from different vendors in the industry. So the opinionated approach really is when it applies to a VMware-based stack, regardless of whether it's running on-premises or off-premises. But it is within the context of a VMware-based solution.
So does this require VxRail, or can it be used in front of any vSphere?
So, this is very consistent with where VMware strategy has been over the last several decades. We work broadly across all industry partners, but today I will be talking about Cloud Foundation on VxRail specifically and where you get the extra benefits, but Cloud Foundation absolutely works with other ecosystem partners as well.
So is this going to replace some of the other automation frameworks you guys have in place as well?
I wouldn't say it's replaced, but maybe I can hear a little bit about the specifics. There's actually a highly complementary aspect of all of this.
Okay, so it'll all tie together.
Yes, but
like,
if
VRA
there's something
or
specific, right? VRA actually fits in right here in which you see the cloud management layer, right? The goal of Cloud Foundation is to actually help bring the goodness across the entire VMware stack and present it in a way that customers can more rapidly consume.
So this is going to sit at the top of the stack and tie everything underneath together.
It ties it at multiple layers. We can talk about exactly how we could think about the layering. Happy to get into that conversation as well.
No, that's cool. I was just curious because, I mean, I'm starting to hear all this stuff and it sounds very... I'm getting all these different products and I'm pulling them all together and which one goes where, which one goes there.
Well, the thing with Cloud Foundation,
right?
It gets complicated.
Yeah, is we want to remove some of that complexity by saying, hey, this is a way that you could deploy the entire VMware solution and how you rationalize and think about all the different components and the different value that it brings.
Is there good or better documentation around this API as well as the VxRail?
Yes, there is an API, for Cloud Foundation for the specific aspects that relate to the workflows that we have sought to simplify.
Okay.
But kind of like your earlier question in regards to does it replace the vSphere APIs, the answer is no.
Okay.
Because there is such an investment out there by the customer base of tying directly into the vSphere APIs, and the goal of Cloud Foundation is not to replace those APIs, it's to supplement and augment them when you're looking at the full entire stack. Okay.
Are you going to get to use cases for VCF in general?
Yes, happy to cover that now. I mean, really the use cases are in this entire journey towards the private cloud and then ultimately setting up for the hybrid cloud. So what we'll commonly see, and I'll share some examples when I bring up those two customers at the end, if that's all right.
That's fine. Yeah.
Okay, great. So in an earlier slide, I called out there, although I didn't verbalize it, that Cloud Foundation is that simplest path to the hybrid cloud. Well, what do I mean by that, right? Up until now, you've heard me talk more about Cloud Foundation as it relates to a customer's on-premises installation. So they still own it, they still operate it, and I'm going to double-click more into that in my upcoming sections. But our whole strategy here is that when you take that same layer, right, and you have that consistency in the compute, network, and storage, and it's being offered by various cloud providers, then that enables that workload mobility without the customer having to refactor the application. Because the vSphere, the storage layer, the NSX networking layer, it's the same across these. And then when you apply the cloud management layer as captured here by our vRealize products, you can then also have a consistent view or a single view across these applications and infrastructure resources, whether it be looking into your on-premises environment or resources and clusters that you have running out there on the cloud providers. Chris.
For the cloud provider section of this, are you alluding to VMC specifically, or are you also taking into consideration cloud native resources?
Yes. So this is, in order to enable this, right, you do need that, excuse me, frog in my throat, that consistent compute layer, which is vSphere for us, right? Now, with our VMC strategy, a big part of it is being able to then take advantage of native services, native cloud services like from Amazon, but it is still running on vSphere, right? It's not running on like the native Amazon hypervisor layer there. Okay. But I would expand upon across this, right? VMware Cloud on AWS was clearly our big first partner that we came out with, but you've seen the announcements, whether it be with Azure, whether it be with GCP, and then also with our large ecosystem of other VMware Cloud providers as well. Just to name some, top of mind, if I were to pick the U.S. region, guys like Rackspace or CenturyLink as other examples.
So what would be really great to clarify, because you brought it up, would clarify is where does VCF start and vSphere begin? Because if I'm vested in vSphere, I get the idea that no matter what cloud provider I have vSphere. VCF offers something different, and I'm not clear on what it is that VCF offers differently than what I'm getting with vSphere natively.
Right. So look at it this way. Let me go back to this diagram. Sorry, I hit too many builds here. Come on. All right, the compute on my diagram here, that's vSphere. So what you're getting with VCF is a superset of what you got with vSphere. But what it does now is instead of only having your compute virtualized, right? 10 years ago, we would have been talking about, wow, this is awesome that I can get a naked virtual machine spun up in 10 seconds when it would have taken me weeks for a physical server. And that was awesome. But this is now saying that wasn't enough, right? In order to get the full agility that everyone looks for when they say cloud computing, you want to make it so that your compute, vSphere, your storage, and your networking are all also virtualized. So what Cloud Foundation gives you is it builds on vSphere, but it now gives you the full core infrastructure fully virtualized and delivered to you as a package in a prescriptive way.
So would it be fair to say that VCF is one opinionated view to deliver hybrid cloud? Some of the products you have or some of the partnerships you have in other solutions are a different opinionated view of how to deliver hybrid cloud.
That is true, but I would say they're based off of a core set of common best practices.
Of vSphere, around vSphere.
Around
I may get different networking, and I may get different interpretations of some of the other services.
Right.
But the core, there is a core, and that core is vSphere.
The core is vSphere and the best practices for running the entire stack. Where you may get some differences between like the best practices and design for on-premises versus something like a VMware Cloud on AWS is the fact that in one case, the customer is managing it. In another case, it's VMware or a partner managing it as a cloud service. And so the day-to-day operations, when you're doing something that's more SaaS-like versus something that you're running yourself, there's just different operational practices that exist there, right? So in those cases, it's a very conscious decision based on the operational model between something that a customer runs on premises versus them consuming basically a cloud service that VMware runs.
Right, so let's say I'm the persona of a developer or someone who just wants to consume VMs or something like that as a service.
Yes.
What portal am I going to?
Yes.
Or what service am I interacting with to allocate those resources?
Yes. Most commonly, it would be with our vRealize automation self-service portal, in which a catalog has been defined, right? The services that developer has permissions to allocate with, resource quotas and all those controls that have already been pre-built in the background. They just go to that portal, click, 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 and then for that persona, they actually probably don't know that it's Cloud Foundation running underneath the hood, right?
Okay.
Cloud Foundation is targeted as that same persona that was vSphere administrator 10 years ago, but whose job or whose team's job is now about the overall infrastructure spanning across compute, network, and storage. So that's the persona we're talking about here.
All right.
Yeah.
I want to expand the persona
Yeah, 'cause I'm
a little bit. So that's one persona. I got the developer who's consuming it, and then I have another persona who's sort of the administrator, who again is not administrating the direct physical assets or vSphere necessarily, but they have to create that catalog.
Yes.
In vSphere automation. So what portal are they and services are they interacting with to generate that
catalog? It is the same tools as through vRealize automation again, right? vRealize automation is both for the person who is creating the catalog, and then ultimately it has a end user portal, if I can call it that, for that developer persona who's consuming what was defined earlier by that administrator.
Can I clarify this? I think. Okay, so when you use VCF, it's most like it's an opinionated install, but basically using the same component. So when you install, it's an automated deployment, nothing more than that. So it's like compute, vSAN, for example, if you're talking storage, NSX, you get a standard deployment on a variety of hardware, Dell in this case, but other vendors are also available. So you get that. Nothing in terms of that, classic vSphere access or other APIs, nothing of that changes. It still remains the same. You can optionally also go for the automation on top. And if you do that, then you still use the same vRealize automation tools that you're already used to. So VCF is basically a packaged installation on top of the different hardware configurations. So it's not a new product in that sense. It's the access, interaction, and the way you build things is still the same. And then the advantage that it gives you basically is to just have a standard install and quick deployment, minimal configuration, automated process.
Right.
Yeah, I was going to say, how when we look at some orchestrators will go in the background and talk to the hardware, but then also have the capability of creating the catalog to present to the users, to spin things up automatically and have the accountability piece and the budgeting and things like that. Well, think about this. The Cloud Foundation is the piece that goes behind the scenes and spins up the hardware. And then the vRealize is the part where the catalog is built, where the developers can go, or whoever, role-based access, can go and say, I want this server, or I want to deploy here, whether it's on-premise or any cloud, wherever it happens to be, right? And they can choose what they want to deploy, if there's an accountancy piece, how much the budget is, who it's going to be billed to, whatever it happens to be. Am I right there? Is that a fair statement?
Got it. Thank you, Arthur. Thank you, Rita. Great explanations there. Okay. Ned, hopefully that helps.
make sense?
Happy to follow up afterwards as well. All right. I just want to touch on one more bit in regards to filling out the hybrid cloud. On that previous slide, I had called out a solution that's part of Cloud Foundation called HCX. And really, one of the most common questions we get from customers is, great, I love the vision, I want to get to that destination. Help me get there. And HCX is one of the key components of that. Essentially, what it enables is the ability to take, some application. Maybe it's running on an older data center. And this is one of the 2 customer examples I'm going to bring up. Maybe it's an old version of vSphere. Maybe you're like, you even ran it on a different hypervisor, but you want to get on board with this VMware vision, right? You haven't virtualized the storage. You haven't virtualized the network. All you've done is you've got virtualized compute. Well, HCX allows you to be able to take that application and move it to a Cloud Foundation environment that's running on premises, or it allows you to pick as a target any of the other cloud providers that are based on that VMware stack here. And the arrow goes both ways purposely, right? If you need to be able to bring that workload back because of business reasons or anything else, you definitely can go bi-directional here as well.
I've got a question, and this is a perfect slide to kind of cover on that question is, in the VMware Cloud Foundation story, the data center makes sense. That's solid. We kind of seem like we're getting that, and you paint the picture of it perfectly for anything that's on premises. And the cloud part of the vision is a perfect fit as well. Where and how does edge play into this? Because it's talked about in previous slides, not necessarily covered so much in here because we've got DC here, cloud there. Where's the edge? Is it like right over there? Is it over there? Is it
What I could have done is if I had drawn a third point on this, right, in regards to edge, we are seeing more and more customers come to us and say, hey, this opinionated approach, it's totally giving me value. Can you help me apply that to the edge, please? So I don't have it on this slide, but the way I'm thinking about planning out my roadmap, I got the core data center, I got hybrid clouds on one side, and I got edge on the other because we think we can apply it that way. All right. So with that as the premise of what was driving us with Cloud Foundation, it just made perfect sense for us to bring Cloud Foundation on top of VxRail because they're both taking this opinionated approach in order to achieve the agility that customers are looking for. Co-engineered, and so there is significant engineering investment from the VMware side as well as the VxRail team side in order to bring this solution together. Because at the end of the day, right, the customer is saying, look, VMware, I love the fact that you solved a lot of these challenges for the VMware software stack, but if you can help us find a way to extend it down to when I'm dealing with even lower level issues with firmware and BIOS and all that compatibility, that would be awesome. So that's really what we set out to do when we brought this joint solution to market. I'm going to go back to some of the terms that you heard earlier from Rick, but this is how it all brings it together, right? We're basically saying let the 2 products continue to do what they do best, but bring it together in a coordinated way. From a day 0 perspective, you're leveraging both VxRail Manager as well as a component that we don't talk about much, but is part of Cloud Foundation called Cloud Builder. And they're basically saying, once you roll a VxRail into the data center, being able to stand up ESX, PSC, vCenter, NSX, vSAN, and then we can go higher in the stack into things like enterprise PKS that give us the Kubernetes. We can go into things such as Horizon. But that whole concept there is, guys, just roll something in and then you do the rest. Boom, 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 boom. The whole entire stack standing up. Then there is also the SDDC manager component, again, part of Cloud Foundation, that does a few things. One of it is automating a lot of the day 2 operations, examples being the lifecycle management of the VMware stack, the certificate management, which is not always an easy process when you're running multiple VMware products. And then it also creates the ability to stand up and manage a construct that we called a workload domain. And I'm going to get to that in the very next slide. I'm not going to cover the automation integrations with the Dell EMC networking because Rick already did that, and he also talked about the value and goodness within VxRail Manager. The workload domain, right? What was prompting this? And so think about it as a way that within a single deployment of Cloud Foundation, to be able to carve up your resources and be able to say, look, I'm going to give one set of resources to the finance team because they needed to spin up a new SQL database for one of their projects. I'm going to carve up another set of resources for that app development team who needs a Kubernetes dial tone because of development that they're doing. Maybe it's for like a machine learning project or something like that. But the idea here is these workload domains all managed under one Cloud Foundation instance. And I'll drill down into that more. But I wanted to make sure to define it here because you're going to see me refer to it. And on the slides, shorthand WLD stands for workload domains. Okay. The pace of continued innovation and capabilities that we've been adding to this joint solution, wanted to capture that here. We first introduced the Cloud Foundation on VxRail offering in March of this earlier year. So you get all the benefits that you expect from VxRail with the firmware upgrades, the call home support, the automated hardware discovery. And then you also get the additional goodness that comes from Cloud Foundation, such as being able to scale by having a lot more clusters in a workload domain, right? Automation of the lifecycle with things like the VMware vRealize products, as well as with NSXT, automated deployment of PKS, as well as Horizon. And so a sampling of the way that we continue to deliver on this value proposition to help that IT infrastructure team who's constantly under pressure to do more with less. So because we have mentioned lifecycle management a few times, let me just bring it up here. And a common question we get is, so I've got this VxRail and I've got this SDDC manager. How do those two interact and coordinate with one another? What does each of them do? So the summary is that we look to the VxRail team to do the things that they're best at, right? So you see there, you got the firmware, right? The vSphere VIBs, the ESX, the vSAN. And then SDDC Manager is able to do the vCenter, the vRealize suite, and the NSX. From a user experience, they are interacting through SDDC Manager, and all the coordination that takes place between these two controllers is done kind of underneath the hood, so the user doesn't have to juggle both of them, right? They go through SDDC Manager, and they just know that the coordination has taken place between the two teams, so that if you're doing an upgrade on ESX, that we've made sure that the rest of the full stack is compatible as well, and vice versa.
So is there 100% feature parity? Is there any reason why you would need to go to one interface over the other?
Not for lifecycle management, right? The workflows are done through the SDDC Manager interface, which I'm going to show on the very next slide. Okay, so all the coordination done kind of underneath the hood. We take care of all of that. Okay, so what the experience looks like here is, in this example, I'm showing the interface in which we're taking a look at the management workload domain, and I'll share about that in a moment. And you get a notification that pops up here, right? Hey, there's an upgrade and patch available for this pool of resources. You're able to quickly view the details to say, well, what is in this upgrade bundle that's been presented? If you double click into it, you're going to see more details to it, right? Then what we've very much learned and applied as a best practice is that pre-check of the environment is absolutely critical. So we have built in the pre-check capabilities. Okay? If you clicked on it, you're going to see all the dozens and dozens of checks that we do, because we want to make sure that we've identified any known problems and resolved them before starting that upgrade process. In this case, the pre-check has been successful. You see that status update there. And then the customer is able to say, am I going to do this now, or do I schedule it for my operational maintenance window? Okay. It goes ahead and kicks off the process. So in our tasks update, you see that the upgrade process has begun. You can see more of the status, right, up in a higher level dashboard as well, right? You see all the steps, how it's progressing. And when it's done, right, what you've got as an outcome is we've now moved you from the previous known good state to now the next known good state based on updated releases.
I have a question about VCF in terms of managing vSphere clusters.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have to have a separate instance of VCF for each vCenter and vSphere instance, or is it capable of managing multiple?
Multiple. Right.
Okay.
Back to the, again, a workload domain does have its own vCenter to it, and you could have multiple workload domains within a Cloud Foundation. So you're managing multiple VC pools of resources using the linked mode capabilities.
Okay, but I can set policy or some settings at the VCF level that will trickle down to all of my vCenter deployments.
Yes, but depends on the specifics, right? In some cases, we didn't want to replace the native capabilities of VC because if we look at it from a persona point of view, if they're used to the workflows going through VC, we felt like in many cases we would direct people to the native VC capabilities.
See, that's where I'm struggling.
It depends
I'm struggling
on the
right there
capabilities and the exact workflows that you're looking for there. Right. The workflows that we focused on for Cloud Foundation was the setup and the ongoing management of the full infrastructure stack, as opposed to replacing and replicating things that could effectively be done through the native VC capabilities.
And to add what I was saying, that right there I think is where I'm struggling at is why would you not make this the main entry point to all the automation across the stack?
Because we have hundreds of thousands of VI administrators
it will break
who
workflows
know
and
how to
things
do
like
it
that.
already. And
But is the intent to eventually replace those?
if it makes sense and if it adds value.
Sure.
If it doesn't add value, you know,
Okay. I think we're getting
We're
somewhere now, 'cause
just,
I've been
yeah,
struggling. I'm
making-
like, this is like a product I would put in place that I would never use.
I think it
Because
adds
I'm gonna
value
go around it.
if you're trying
You have to go around it.
You have to
move
go
up in the stack.
Yes.
I don't
right.
necessarily need to be
If
down
you're
at this
just
level
wanting to do
figuring
vSphere,
all these different
this
things.
is probably not the right
No, I'm
solution
talking
for
full
you.
stack. I'm just looking at this from that perspective
But
because
there's a certain level of friction when you have to move from one interface to another to
Yes.
get your tasks done. And if I have a task that I want to accomplish, I'd rather go to a single portal or administrative endpoint to accomplish all of those tasks rather than going, okay, I have to start the task here, but then I have to go to this interface, and then I have to go to that one, and then go back to this one because I've set up the things I need here.
You mean the Office 365
Yeah.
experience?
Yes.
because when I'm doing orchestration, right, and I'm going to end with this, I'm going to do it really quick because I know we want to hear other things. When I'm doing orchestration, if I'm talking to this and I'm talking to that and I'm talking to this, it's a lot of correlation points I have to start saying. That needs to align. I need a status from that before I can do this. My workflow is crazy, right? Whereas if I'm going to a single entry point, I get the status from one place. So, and that's where, and it's starting to come together because I've been struggling the whole time trying to figure this out where this really comes into play, and I understand.
Right.
Not the whole thing,
Yeah.
but I'll end with that.
It's that movement from
There's a lot of points.
virtualization
Yes.
to true private cloud.
Yes.
Is having that unified administrative endpoint where you can accomplish your workflow
Yeah.
across multiple different points of presence.
Yeah. Point taken.
So
No,
when
that's
does
fine.
this software ship? Does it ship when there's a new version of ESX? Does it ship when there's? I'm trying to figure out, like, is there a gap between new features of some of the underlying technologies
Yeah.
and the management interface?
Yeah, we strive and we push really hard to make sure we minimize that gap. And when there is gaps, it's because we're finishing up the commitment of that full stack interoperability and testing to deliver on that promise. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to keep rolling here. Right, just want to cover workload domains, and then we'll end with a couple of customer examples here. This is a visual representation of what I was describing, so that within a single instance of Cloud Foundation, you are able to carve out resources here. And one of the key things we wanted to enable is support for different hardware profiles that's based on what the application needs are. The example that I'm bringing up here is GPUs, physical GPUs are expensive. And so you want to apply them towards the applications that make use of them, whether it be here in this example, right? Desktop workloads can take advantage of them, or if you're running some sort of machine learning AI workloads, it could also take advantage of them. So here, right, in this pool of resources, make sure that we map physical servers that have the GPUs that are enabled. Earlier, there was a question about like different storage profiles. So you could imagine that, hey, if I'm running a database here, I'm going to need a different set of physical storage capabilities than if I'm running, containers workloads, right? You have very different storage characteristics there. And so how do you then view that mapping into actually your physical environment? So if you imagine a rack, right? We would start off, there is a management domain that's required for us, and so you start off there with the 4 nodes. But then you can imagine the flexibility of being able to say, look, I'm going to carve up these other nodes targeted towards different applications or projects, giving each its own pool of resources. I can expand the capacity if I have the physical nodes available. And then when I bring in additional racks and capacity to scale, you could see how then you're able to take this logical construct of these pool of resources and actually map it so that you have that flexibility across different physical resources there. And if a project happens to finish, you go ahead and repurpose those physical resources to another set of applications.
When you're talking about the mappings and the policy basis of those mappings, is that a policy inherent within vCenter? Are you using resource groups? Are you using a policy base within VCF?
Well, it is based upon vCenter and ESX and DRS clusters underneath the hood.
Right, but what mechanism are you using? I mean, not the vMotion mechanism, but the actual. Like, are you tagging? Are you using key value pairs to like move stuff around, or what's the actual policy? How are you doing it with that? And if that's a very long question, then I understand that you're constrained.
Okay, maybe I'll take that one offline with you, Chris.
Okay, sure.
So make sure I fully understand the question and answer
sure.
to it. Thanks. All right, I'm going to skip this one for the sake of time. I was just going to walk you through the workflow of how you do that mapping in terms of setting up that cluster of resources. And finish here with just 2 examples of how customers are using it. The first one, NTT, 73 million mobile subscribers, biggest telecommunications operator in Japan, and they chose VMware Cloud Foundation on VxRail as part of supporting their 5G programs, working with partners. And what was critical for them was the automation, the flexibility of being able to quickly stand up resources as they were onboarding new partners. And so here, one of the most attractive things for them was reducing the dependencies upon the physical infrastructure because they had virtualized the entire stack, and that's what enabled the flexibility and automation. The other example here, I don't have permission to share the customer name, but they are in the insurance industry. And their challenge was that they had 2 data centers that were aging, let's put it that way. And they're like, look, we don't want to just do a simple refresh. We want to fundamentally do something different. And we want the ability of being able to flexibly run workloads on either of the data centers, and then in the future be able to take advantage of public cloud resources as well. So phase 1, the deployment, was to cover the 2 data centers. They refreshed, used Cloud Foundation so that compute, storage, networking was all virtualized. And then they're using the HCX capability I showed earlier to easily allow them to, 1, take the workloads from their legacy data centers into the new platform, and then 2, have the flexibility of moving workloads between the 2 data centers even after it had been stood up.